Welcome to another fascinating interview and information session. This are sponsored by the Saanich Peninsula Trade Committee, Chamber of Commerce Trade Committee, and these were started in response to some obvious policy changes down south that started 9 months ago, and chamber business members and business members across Canada, for that matter, asking how do we react? How do we react to the tariff war? How do we react to the changing economy? So John Treleaven and I have been inviting guests. Chris Lane, a good afternoon to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we asked, we've been investigating and trying to understand how we can provide information for business to manage a changing economy, right, John?
Yeah, for Chris's benefit, this is the fourth interview that we've done. The last one was with Carolyn Tompkins, the CEO of the Forum for International Trade Training. And Chris, I can't go further without congratulating you on your appointment. When I look at your CV, this is the third major visible leadership position that you're occupying in the province of Saskatchewan, and that's terrific. Anyway, we began with, at least our last interview was Carolyn Tompkins, who, as you know, is the CEO of an organization that provides international trade training across the country. And including when I was in STEP, and I'm sure it's true now, many of the STEP employees were either CITPs or were taking the courses. There, the point is that actually international trade is very easy if you don't need to make money at it. But if you want to make money, you got to know what you're doing. And FIT is in that business. Before that, we interviewed John Tennant, a former colleague of mine in Foreign Service, whose last Foreign Service assignment, he was Consul General in Detroit, but he had a very long career. And I think starting in like 2005 or 6, he was the CEO, this will be near and dear to your heart, Chris, of the Kitchener-Waterloo Economic Development Authority. So for much of his retirement life, he's been going full blast in one of Canada's tech hubs. And he provided a really good discussion of the threads, the international trade advantages that Canada offered because of years of negotiating free trade agreements around the world. Prior to that interview, John and I had a good discussion about why are we doing this? What's the issue around trade diversification? And my concern has been that the discussions that I see and the articles that I read most recently in the Globe today by a former governor of the Bank of Canada and former chief economist of TD Bank discuss the matter at a very high level. But what we're dealing with, as you know only too well, is a trading relationship which involves more than 4 million employees, almost 5 million people on both sides of the border. It's not just about buying and selling, it's employing. And years ago, when I was in global affairs, I chaired a group of economists who figured out that $1 billion worth of exports created or sustained 11,000 jobs. Today, more or less, it's 6,000 jobs. Well, trade diversification doesn't happen between nations. It happens when businesses transact. And the task that the current situation is providing to the Canadian and the US economies is how to realign the jobs of more than 5 million people both sides of the border so they continue to create value for their families. I think there needs to be a thorough long-term discussion of the risk mitigation measures that are available to Canadian companies, and we're talking thousands of them, as you know very well. And as much as the policy environment is extremely important, that's what John discussed, The building the capacity within the workforce in Canada is extremely important. The work that you and your colleagues do at STEP is totally critical. And as I always say, it's customers that will diversify Canadian trade. Anyway, John and I, for the foreseeable future, will be holding conversations along those lines. And we both welcome you today and look forward to a robust discussion on how STEP, since 1996, has been approaching the identification of customers for what is probably the most externally focused province in the country.
Well, thank you for that welcome, John, and the kind words. I appreciate it. I would echo that. Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership, or STEP, as we will call it in this interview, occupies a really unique space, not only in Saskatchewan, but I would say in Canada and possibly in the world as well. And for 3 decades now, a jurisdiction like Saskatchewan that exports overwhelmingly most of what it produces, needs and relies on an organization like this in a global trade environment that is always shifting. And so our greatest strength and our greatest offer here might be our agility, is that trade and the networks and the connections are a lot different today than they were 30 years ago, and they're going to continue to evolve and be different. So
Yeah.
I can't think of a more important window and a more important time to be grateful for the opportunity to lead whatever the next evolution of this organization is going to be for the betterment of people in Saskatchewan, but Canada as a whole.
Chris, I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of podcasts/vodcasts over the past 5 or 6 years. And what always strikes me is how I forget and assume that everyone who's watching knows exactly what everyone's doing in these little boxes. And so maybe we could just take a step back and could you explain to us, please, what is STEP? Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership, you're the CEO. What is it? Why is it? Why does John, and of course I will learn, why does John think STEP is so important in these times?
Well, sure. I appreciate that. And STEP, as I mentioned, Saskatchewan Trade and Export Partnership, was started 30 years ago as a unique, independent organization that brought government support and policy directives together directly with private industry and business. And so today we are a member-based, industry-led organization, independent, nonprofit that is closely aligned with the different policies and opportunities that we do rely in this country on governments to open the doors for, whether that's at national or subnational levels. And so we occupy the space in between government and industry on behalf of private business. And our main function in the way we do that is capacity building and trade enablement services. So we offer advisory, market intelligence, and ultimately market development work in markets around the world on behalf of Saskatchewan members in industry to open and secure pathways to make those sort of sales and commercial relationships between companies and sometimes between governments. But as John mentioned, trade doesn't happen between nations; it happens between private industry. And so that's why it's an important and unique structure that we occupy here. And so in the course of 30 years, we've grown this organization to well over 400 members today. We think that is only going to increase as the way that the global economy is obviously building towards, and the kind of growth that we're seeing here in Saskatchewan. More and more companies are moving from being just domestic suppliers and providers to opening and looking at international markets. And I think that's being encouraged at all levels of government here. And so they really rely on us as the purveyors of the expertise and the advisory services and the capacity building services to be able to help those kind of companies turn into reliable exporters. And so that's kind of in a nutshell what we do.
Yeah, Chris, I'll just add a couple of points from the early days. the government of Saskatchewan in the 90s decided that they wanted to have a look at how best public resources could be invested in creating more export opportunities for Saskatchewan business. And 10 or 20 business people spent 2 years looking at options. And when they presented their report to the government of Saskatchewan, the recommendation was that the government of Saskatchewan get out of the trade promotion business, take the money and the people engaged in trade development and put them into this not-for-profit corporation. The business people, though, were very concerned that since about 80%, I don't know who's now, but about 80% of the budget would come from the province, that money not be squandered. And so they insisted that companies that wanted to take advantage of the services STEP had to offer had to pay an annual membership fee. And it's a public policy fee. It's not a revenue fee, really. But that one piece of advice that the province has accepted separates STEP from every other trade promotion organization in the world. You know who your customers are. And your staff, you and your staff will always try to expand the customer base.
So John, if I could just, like, this is an amazing organization, an amazing idea. Why isn't it in every province?
Okay, let me add one more thing. And when Chris talks about the services that are delivered, they're to STEP members. These are custom services. If you're a STEP member, you can call STEP and ask for a market research report to be done on a little sliver of the market in which you're interested. And that market report never appears on a website. It goes only to the company.
This is amazing. So what? I can't wait to hear Chris's answer.
So, in my experience in working in economic development, market diversification, market access in Saskatchewan, there is something unique about the size and scale of the industry and opportunity in Saskatchewan is large, and it has been large for a long time in sectors like energy and mining and obviously agriculture. But what on the flip side of that, there's a uniqueness in the agility that comes with being a small province from a population and a decision-making capacity. So those two things together uniquely create an environment for an organization like STEP to, one, be created, two, be supported, and three, to grow. That is not the case in every other jurisdiction in this country. So what happens is it fosters really immediate alignment around other industry organizations, policymakers, ECDEV organizations, and private business. That happens with like an almost alarming amount of speed and alignment in Saskatchewan that doesn't exist in a lot of other places. And I would know because I've had the privilege to live in a number of different provinces and cities in this country. And there is something special, there's bottled magic in what happens in Saskatchewan. So I think we have occupied a very unique space, and the originators of this organization were visionary in that. And I think the leaders successively in the last 3 decades have really held that flame well and protected it and grown it into an increasingly unique organization in the country. And we find ourselves in that position today. And I feel that responsibility is great. That's not lost on me. And that we need to continue to evolve with the challenges and the opportunities for Saskatchewan and for Canada in this environment. And that's the secret to our success here. I think it would be very different, John, if we tried to create STEP today the way that it was created 30 years ago. I think, I think the space for it would be narrower. I think in the country. So part of this was timing. Part of it was vision. And then, like I say, the bottled magic here is just the agility that comes from being a small province with the opportunity that comes from being a significantly large GDP exporter.
Look at John. John looks like a proud papa there.
No, I had nothing to do with creating it, but by pure happenstance, I happened to be in Regina my role for the Trade Commissioner Service at that time was, among other things, our regional offices. And so I was in Saskatchewan for a visit meeting with the Saskatchewan government, Jerry Adamson, in fact, who became the vice president of STEP and was my vice president, on the day STEP was created. So I attended the reception at the Hotel
Oh, come on,
Saskatchewan.
take some ownership, attaboy.
But I'll tell you, I
Chris,
just want to give you a very specific example of the advantage of proximity in a place like Saskatchewan. So today, while I was out walking to get a coffee at lunch, we ran into people from the Trade Commissioner Service who co-located in the same office building, and ran into the ADM, the Associate Deputy Ministers, in the international offices section of the provincial government. So that, not to say that it's all like, the business doesn't get done by bumping into people, but in some cases, the proximity really allows a familiarity and an alignment here that, like I said, I think is special.
that's true.
I would I'd like to get into a little bit of the meat and potatoes of this. And let's assume for a second that I'm now a business in any part of Canada, and I've had my trades challenges with the US this year. What, Chris, are some of the common threads of questions and help that businesses are needing? Can it be generalized in some way, or maybe by sector they're different? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, the commonalities, no matter what size of business or what sector, because they're different, right? I mean,
Yeah.
a small, SME that ships products, by mail is different than one that ships by
Yes.
rail car, for example. So, but the commonalities here are really, really about, is this market going to come back the way it was before? Is
Mm.
there, and
Wow.
how much effort do we maintain keeping those relationships warm, so that if a future trade policy allows the reopening of that market the way we knew it before, we want to be ready for that. Because really, when you think about it, North America's trade infrastructure was really built north-south. So, it's not always as easy as just saying we're going to pick up our marbles, our products, and go to a different part of the world. It's the infrastructure and enablement around the back and forth, especially in manufacturing, um, and processing. A product can go back and forth across the border multiple times before it's ready to be sold to someone. So this whole, ecosystem of north-south trade is not something to be just walked away from. But companies don't, there's only so much time and capital that can be
Wait.
patient about that.
Yes.
So there's that. So there's always a discussion around, how much of our business, can we de-risk to make sure that we're there if the U.S. market and that trade relationship comes back in a form that we recognize. The other challenge is, it's one thing to say trade diversification. It's an entirely different thing to understand what does that actually mean, and what kind of capacity do companies, and our members in particular, have to either access a new market or increasingly modify their existing product to fit in a market. It's not just that you can take product A that was useful in Texas and now it's useful in Vietnam. Those are not exactly the same things all the time.
Mhm.
So one is the company, does it see a market in there? Does the math work on product development and diversification, and then certification as well. So you don't just flip the lights on and off. There's an entire process that has to be undertaken. If you're going to long-term diversify, much of the products that we have here in Saskatchewan, so that then you can start being a reliable provider in other markets. And that's a lot of the work that we do here at STEP, is helping companies understand what that journey is, and then connecting them with, our job is connecting buyers and sellers, really.
Exactly. And
Making sure.
the market research, the custom market research that STEP staff do for companies is beyond valuable. How many small businesses get a chance to measure twice and cut once?
It's a great
STEP
point, John.
members can do that.
we do hundreds of reports for our member companies every year, and they can be anything from initial, market readiness reports, to some lead generation work, all of it really. I don't want to give all away the secrets here.
But
That's amazing.
you're not giving any secrets, but it's approaches. And to go to one of John's earlier question, my thought has always been about STEP, that the approach that you so successfully use to promote and achieve trade objectives for the 400 members, that's fantastic, can be duplicated. It's not a problem because the architecture is so logical. How many qualified trade leads, for example, did STEP deliver to member companies last year?
Again, it measures in the hundreds, and not only qualified trade leads, but enablement for deals and market is another one of our key metrics, and it's in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the individual member themselves and the size of their business. So,
I want to move to Saskatchewan. What's going on?
there's kind of an immediate
great.
gratification in this business when you can see that the work that we've done and we've been able to enable results in that kind of direct growth and opportunity for Saskatchewan companies, and ultimately, that creates jobs here at home, which is when in a growing economy in Saskatchewan is predicted to lead the country in growth here in the next 2 to 3 years by most of the major banks. Some of this is just keeping up with the opportunity. It doesn't necessarily need us to be able to. The economy is going to grow. The GDP of this province is going to grow because we have really what the world needs here. And our job is to help build the capacity on the back end so our members can continue to supply the global demand for the products and the services that we have here in Saskatchewan.
I'd like to ask you your answer to one of the common questions you identified from businesses, that being, do we think that the trade relationship might normalize? How are you answering that for folks? It would appear to me that it's forever changed. Certainly, that's what the Prime Minister is saying. Just curious what you guys are saying.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, I don't want to play the part of an analyst or trade negotiator here, but we're recording this on the day that our Prime Minister and the President have met for the first time in a long time, and I watched that. I watched the closing news conference, and I think it's hard to. Nobody is taking bets. I'll say that. So there's a lot of hedging going on. I think, though, what is real is that the U.S. market is large. The integration of the trade and product system that we have between our two countries will continue to exist. The framework by which that operates, I think, is changing and maybe forever changed as well. So, I have a lot of faith in the agility of Canadian businesses to adapt and find opportunity in that. So, while we are spending most of our time talking about diversification in this business these days, we understand that keeping and advocating for U.S. customers for Canadian products and Saskatchewan products will probably continue to be a core part of what prosperity looks like here. Whether that's large scale commodities like energy and agriculture, or whether that's advanced manufacturing and finished goods.
Farm equipment, for example.
Farm equipment, for example, is a great example in Saskatchewan.
Yeah. I mean, Chris was the CEO of Agribition, which is one of the largest agriculture fairs in Canada, indeed in North America, held annually in Regina. The other major show, as you know, held in Regina is the Farm Progress Show. And both of those trade shows draw buyers from all over the world. The Saskatchewan, but the prairies in general, have been the hub of major technological improvements in dryland farming for the world. So the demand for those kind of products and that kind of technology is not about to disappear. And
No, and I would say as we become more aware and more conscious of carbon responsible practices, including agriculture, Saskatchewan has a great story to tell on the R&D and the innovation side of things. Right from
absolutely.
the original farming practice being the home of zero-till cultivation to the latest studies that we do out of some of our institutes here that show the carbon footprint on the commodities that we grow here is the best in the world or the lowest in the world, and not by a little bit, by a long shot. And so, not only is the equipment that we build here in Saskatchewan built for climate friendly agricultural productions, but the processes by which we grow what we grow here means the commodities that come out of the ground here are also easily the most carbon friendly in the world. So you can add up every step along the way here, and really the opportunity for Saskatchewan exports at any stage in any sector is as exciting as perhaps it's ever been. But again, not without challenges.
Yeah, Chris, I'm going to take advantage of this interview to record for history the remarks of Brad Micknick. We worked together. He was in the Saskatoon office. He ran the office. And most of his focus was on the farm equipment business, which meant he spent a lot of time in the United States. And I will never forget this. He was talking about Saskatchewan's the technology and the equipment available and all that. And he said, he said, equipment that's in museums in Saskatchewan is in the fields in Texas. If you have a heavily subsidized agriculture sector, why do farmers need to invest in like absolutely state-of-the-art technology? And we had, now listen, I'm talking a while ago now, but we had a significant advantage in the structure of Canadian agriculture. You've just said, we have got to be the best. We got to be price competitive, quality competitive, and there are fewer, let's say, government supports to the average farm in Western Canada. And I've never forgotten Brad's comment. And he spent a lot of time throughout the grain belt in the United States. And of course, a lot of Saskatchewan companies, Canadian companies, sell lots of equipment through shows in the US.
Well, it's a great point. And I might also add that it's a great example of the innovation that's happening now and the partnerships that's happening globally when we talk about diversification. So, traditionally, Saskatchewan has been great at making farm equipment for other places that farm like us, which is large scale, dry land, broadacre farms. But increasingly, we're finding partnerships with global companies that want to adjust both the size and application and the kind of equipment so that they can work in different agriculture scenarios, which is fascinating to me. Is that when we talk about product diversification, we're immediately talking about market diversification, and that opens up massive opportunities for not just people that either farm or mine or operate like we do, but the technology and the processes that we have are valuable at different sizes and applications.
Yes.
So one of the tenets of online conversations is that we have short attention spans of our viewers. We're at about half an hour now, and I think we should likely say thank you. But I do want to end it with a statement. One might say political in nature. That being that I think about 20, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in private business all my life. And I recall 20, 30 years ago, Canada leading the world in innovation, in entrepreneurialism, in risk-taking, in doing things differently, in helping our people. We lost that. Somewhere in here, we lost that. And whether or not that's been prompted by world events, we're regaining it. We're sort of waking up to the fact that we can do things differently and better than most people in the world. And I'm hearing that from you, Chris. I'm hearing that sense of optimism, that sense of the cup is half full. And we can help not only companies, but everyone in this country. And I'm loving that. I can see why you're saying and why John is supporting the fact that Saskatchewan might be now picked as a country leader in business and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thanks for the time, gentlemen, and I would be happy to have this conversation anytime in the future.
Terrific. Chris, I think you're the 6th CEO of STEP. I congratulate you on your appointment. You've got a wonderful team to work with. And you've already told us, demonstrated your pride and confidence in the product that you are bringing to the world. Best of luck.
Great.
Thank you.